Right, folks, welcome to the Tuesday at 2 business chat on Facebook and LinkedIn. And just a second here, I got to get the final stream going live here. Bear with me, folks, 1 second. And stream setup, webcam, streaming software. Oh, I lost the setting here, so I'll have to go back on that. We'll get it on the record, Chip. So folks, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the People's Trust Company Business Live Show, and we're trying to do a podcast most Tuesdays at 2 o'clock, and we bring in business folks from around the area and different sectors and different environments. And we had Tim Smith on here a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about all of the stuff in and around St. Albans. And today we have Chip Sawyer, who is the Chief of Development for St. Albans City. And I believe Chip has been with the city about 15 years. And Chip, why don't you give the viewers a quick introduction, because you're going to do so much better of a job than I did. And while you're doing that, I'm going to try to upstart this St. Albans Facebook page.
Thanks, Jay. Hello, everyone. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for the City of St. Albans. And my department includes many city functions, including permitting, planning, assessing and property valuation, special projects, grants, the downtown program, very important there, stormwater planning, actually. And we're very much involved in development in the city, as well as some of the more typical municipal functions you might find in a community like ours.
Well, that's a mouthful in itself, Chip, of the areas that I didn't even think about stormwater, which is a huge issue on stuff. But when I think about you, Chip, I always think of the really smart guy behind the scenes, collecting all the data, all the information, all the precise things. And then I go to talk to you about something and I'm like, hey, what's going on with this? And why can't you do that? And then you're like, well, you know what, Jay? First, we got to do this, and then we got to do this and this and this and this. And there's like 17 things that I didn't think of the 20-step process to get a project done. And it takes time, and it takes money, and it takes expertise. And then when you take a step back and look at what you guys have accomplished over the last 15 years that you've been the director, it's just absolutely amazing to me to look at all the projects while, I'm going to put you on the big screen because we're going to listen to you for a bit. But, you go back and you look at the TIF project from St. Albans City, from one end to the other, that was talked about, and all of a sudden it started creeping in. And then before you know it, the whole place looks absolutely phenomenal. And I hope on that project, Chip, I know in the beginning there was a little bit of dissension in the public. And then I think as time went on, you won them over. And I hope now that it's over, because the place looks absolutely fabulous, right? And I'm seeing so much more traffic downtown. I'm even hearing, and have been hearing for years since the refurb of downtown, of Chittenden County traffic coming in, usually for a restaurant or two, and they just love that downtown feel. But I've also heard of several people selling their Chittenden County homes, buying a home in St. Albans City, and they buy a property specifically within walking distance of downtown because of all the downtowns around. I mean, you guys have an absolutely perfect situation for a walkable downtown where somebody, potentially wouldn't need to drive their car for a week.
Yeah, that's part of what we're trying to do, and it's been the vision for a long time in the city. It's the way it was historically, back when downtown St. Albans was the commercial center of the county and the only place where you could get things that you need every day, like shoes and clothes and groceries. And, things have changed with big box stores, and then with online, we've had to, downtown has had to adapt. And downtowns across the state are subject to so many challenges like that they really only thrive in the communities that realize that they need a little extra juice than other greenfields where it's easy to build, just say some new franchise operation. And that's all great. I'd say, getting back to your comment about Chittenden County, I think St. Albans has always benefited from the fact that it's close enough to Burlington where it benefits from that proximity. And now the whole Burlington area is even bigger than it used to be. But we're far enough away that we have our own identity. So for some folks, we're a bedroom community, and that's fine. We're glad you're here. Come and be a resident here or be a visitor here and be part of the community. That's awesome. And then there are some folks like myself who actually rarely leave the city because we're lucky enough to live and work in the same place. It's interesting. You were talking about some of the the steps that are necessary to get from where we started to where we are now. And you introduced me as the Chief Development Officer, and I appreciate that. But the reality is that the Chief Development Officer of the City of St. Albans is our city manager, Dominic Cloud. And he has been given that job by our city council. And time again, we've been given that job by the voters to do whatever it takes to get through the challenges that historic urban centers like ours have to deal with, and just get things done and make the things that community members want to see. And so we've been laser focused on actively providing the things that our community members and voters would like to see, even outside the realm of what a traditional municipality would provide. We plow the roads, we treat the sewer, we provide clean water, we keep the land records, we have city hall, we have a great police force, fire department, but we've also found that the community realized that in order for us to be able to sustainably provide those services that everyone's used to, we have to get involved in the health of other aspects of the community. Getting back to being able to have a healthy community in general, a whole sense of place for everyone's quality of life, and also having a healthy grand list. So the development team is nearly all of our department heads. Everyone in the city has some role in the community development that we've been doing. So when it comes to that list of things that our project has to go through that you mentioned, we've made sure that if the city has a rule, if the city has a regulation or something, or a hoop you have to jump through, there better be a good reason why it exists. If it's not something that guides the development that we want to see happen in the city in a constructive way, then it probably shouldn't exist. And there are certainly things you should prohibit and things you should restrict. But we've changed our rules many times over my 15 years here, because we've realized, what, this zoning rule stands in the way of putting this development here, and everyone wants to see it. So let's just make sure it happens. And we've gotten very good at dealing with all the other rules, state rules and federal rules that you have to go through for development. And we understand that when you're engaging in public-private partnership, and that's a lot of what we've been doing, you've got to let all the parties excel at what they do well. And you also have to, as a municipality, we have to work as hard as we can to operate at their quick timelines that they expect in the private market. So that's something we've been trying to do, and I think we've done it pretty well, and we have a pretty good success rate.
You really touched on, for me, from an outsider looking in on important things or items that could get hung up. You said that you get stuff done, and I don't know if I quoted you exactly on that, but when I look around at a lot of the projects that you guys have accomplished over the years, I could see other municipalities getting bogged down on a bunch of more studies and letting the community have a debate on what they think should happen and whatnot, and nothing actually happened. And the fact that you guys have stepped in and made stuff happen, and I can just kind of close my eyes and dart around downtown quickly and see a bunch of buildings that have been, it was a dilapidated area that was unoccupied or in poor condition or whatever, and you guys bought it, tore it down, built it up, and turned it into something really, really nice. And you did that with some pretty decent speed, considering how a lot of bureaucracy does run slow. So I hand it to you guys for what you have done. And again, downtown St. Albans looks beautiful.
Yeah, we love hearing that. We hear it often. The planning and the studies, it's important. I'm not going to knock communities that sit down, come up with good plans, good studies, bring on good consultants, have public input. That's all necessary. But I think where some local governments might run into inertia, I guess is the right word, is that you come up with a vision and then you sit around and expect someone else to do it. We have there are studies and plans that are behind what we've done in the city. We've done that activity too. We have an old downtown revitalization plan from 1980. That's I think I have a copy of it. We when St. Albans for the Future was formed and we got downtown designation from the state, we had a marketing study and then we did a master plan. We went through those steps. But around the same time, if you remember, Walmart was coming and everyone's worried about what that was going to do to downtown. And, even before Walmart, more stores were moving out of downtown. So people were going farther and farther away for those everyday items that they used to come here for, right? And I think it was city leadership and then eventually the voters that got the idea that, no one's going to do it. There's no one who's going to do the things, who's going to fill the storefronts, who's going to build the new housing. That the market just doesn't want to do it unless someone gets involved to engage in better partnership and help take on more risk and better get the land and the project ready to go so that the project starts to pencil out better for developers. And the visitors, jobs, people, they can all leave the city of St. Albans whenever they want. The only people who can't leave the city of St. Albans is the municipality of the city of St. Albans. We are here and we're not going anywhere. So the cost of doing nothing and the cost of waiting for the private market to come and get us to whatever the future of our community is, it's higher to do nothing. The risk is higher to do nothing than to try to do something. So that's why we started stretching the bounds of what a municipality can do. A municipality can prepare land. A municipality can set the stage for a project. A municipality can access various different funding streams at affordable rates. And we're not talking property tax general fund. We're talking about all kinds of funding streams that don't hit your property tax bill. Mm-hmm. And we're really good at that. And then we have to partner with developers who are really good at what they do. And we need to let them make money. That's what developers do. They need to be allowed to make money. And then we need to be allowed to say, as part of the deal, this is what we want to see. This is what we think of as the public good that comes out of this project. So we want to see apartments, or we want to see a hotel, or we want to see a new streetscape, or we want to see a parking garage. And in the end, everyone gets what they want. But the key was that the municipality had to realize that if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it. So we have to get it started.
That's an excellent. I loved how you put that, and I certainly buy into that. And I don't think I've ever formulated that thought in my head. But the cost of doing nothing is very expensive, as you mentioned. So you brought up Walmart real quick. I'm going to put you in the hot seat, and then I want to move on to some commercial, and then hopefully we have time for residential. We're about halfway through the 30 minutes that I asked you for of your time. Walmart was a long time coming, and then I don't know, what was it, 20 or 25 years before it got built. Do you see it negatively impacting downtown or not? Was it a break even, do you think? Or what's the over under on that from your opinion, your point of view?
Well, Walmart hasn't broken downtown, but when you look at the two parties, downtown's the one that had to change. Walmart's good at being Walmart, and Walmart and stores like it took over that general commercial activity where people think of, oh, I need something. Oh, well, now you either think of Amazon or you think of Walmart. Now we want people to think of downtown too, because there are many great experiences and things you can purchase downtown, but it's got to be something that you really can't find online. A successful downtown retail store has to be something where the experience, the being able to touch it, and sort of the being able to not really find it anywhere else, or maybe it's an item where you really need the inspiration of being in the place. Those are the types of shops that do well downtown. And then there are the restaurants. I mean, the restaurants are crazy awesome. And, obviously food and the dining experience is always going to be Walmart proof and online proof. So downtowns and Walmarts and Sam's Clubs and Costco's and Amazon are all going to have to live in the same world. And the downtowns that excel, that prosper, are the ones that are like ours, where, we've benefited from, the city has helped fill storefronts, and we've talked to people about, why can't you move your business in here? What are the obstacles in your way? And is there a way the city can sort of remove some of the obstacles? But also it's these sole proprietors and these small business owners that put everything they've got into the businesses, like Thirsty Thrifters, Eloquent Page, Renee's new place, Spotlight Vintage, Fashion Sense. All their time and energy is on those shelves and keeping that door open, and hoping that they can turn those lights on every day. And that's the sort of challenge that the Walmarts of the world don't have to deal with, but we have people dedicated to being part of our downtown community and being there for their customers.
Yeah, it is kind of nice to, if you need something high end or maybe not even high, just not at the bottom of the barrel. You want something that's good quality, and you want to go in and talk to the storekeeper and ask some questions that are a little more technologically advanced than the bottom. You need that. And some people don't like going to the big box store and waiting in line. And so there's definitely a need for very specific and different ranges of quality services, expertise on how to use the item that you're acquiring and stuff. So that's enough of Walmart. Let's go into the commercial, and we'll maybe on the commercial side of things, we'll just do a broad brush, and then we'll dive into some residential stuff. Because as you know, you and I were on that, I don't know what I try to call it a committee, but it really wasn't about housing. And I really want to dive into that. But on the commercial side of things, geez, Chip, how many projects were you guys part of over the last, 15 or 20 years? It seems like a few. It's double digits for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it started out with commercial space. We've pivoted to housing just as many other people have, but the St. Albans house, you might remember when that building was falling down.
Sure.
And kind of a brand bruise because it had the name of the city on the building. And, that was actually a project where the city really started dipping its toe and getting involved. And we, after a lot of time, the Preservation Trust of Vermont helped us out by helping us fund the option on the building. And then after talking to lots of folks, we found a gentleman named Jim Cameron who was pretty good at fixing up old buildings, and he put skin in the game to buy the building and fix it up. And then the city put some skin in the game as well. A $50,000 grant and a $100,000 loan. And when the St. Albans house opened, the Main Street streetscape was kind of just getting finished at the same time. And there were tours, and I think people saw we saw the effect of having that building fixed up on people's pride and sense of place in the community. Yeah. Sort of gave us that momentum to start doing more commercial projects. Now, Jay, these TIF bond votes and the other bond votes of different sorts, the local option tax and the city pool, they've all been approved by 2-to-1 margins or 3-to-1 margins.
Wow.
Obviously there are a lot of questions, and there are a lot of people who think that municipalities shouldn't be doing what we're doing. But I'd say the controversy has been pretty low. The voters have supported these projects every step of the way. On the TIF side, we have to structure it so that as the debt's being serviced, it actually doesn't come out of people's tax bills. And that's why TIF is so important. You've got to fund it with the new value that's coming out of the property that wouldn't have happened unless you'd done the project. So that's why when we built the parking garage, we had to make sure that the hotel and the new state office building on Federal Street, that those new property taxes would then fund the parking garage and all the brownfields that we had to do at the site. Ace Hardware was actually, I think that's a TIF project that was certainly done before the parking garage. Ace Hardware might be our first TIF project. And so it's the same thing. Everything we did at that site to help the brownfields, assembling the lots, that debt service gets paid by the new taxes that we were able to raise from Gordon's building, the Ace Hardware building. And then another big one, obviously, is Congress in Maine. That's where we first dipped our toe into a housing project. We had the commercial building up front that's across from City Hall, but then you've got 130-unit building owned by Champlain Housing Trust, 30 apartments, and then you have the 33 apartments at 10 Maiden Lane. And then Fonda, the senior housing at Fonda and the Rail Dispatch Center having those new developments there have helped us pay for everything that was associated with cleaning up Fonda. And now the workforce housing, the 87 units with Milot Real Estate, they're finishing their financing, and we're hoping that they can break ground this year.
And where are those 87 going? Is that a Fonda project also?
Well, if you go to the Fonda site and you go to the new Federal Street extension that we built right off of Lower Newton and Federal Street.
Sure.
So basically what's going to happen is that the rest of Fonda that you can see out there, all the vacant land, it's all going to go away. It's going to become those two large apartment buildings. And then that'll be it. The Fonda site kind of won't exist anymore. It'll be a senior housing project, an apartment building, and the Rail Dispatch Center. And the city will finally no longer own the Fonda property.
Wow. Wow. I haven't kept up to date on the Fonda. I've just been watching it happen over the years. But, going back to the ACE project, when Gordy built that, I was kind of reading up on it as much as I could. That was no easy task within itself because of the multiple property owners. It wasn't just one property, right? Wasn't there several properties that were associated with that? And all of that staging, staggering, or, it can't work unless all the parties say yes to move forward. So that just seemed very complex to me from a negotiation and planning strategy on how to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's where we were learning, okay, so this is why the city's got to do it, because a private developer or Gordon himself, Gordon Winters, the owner of the Ace Hardware franchise there, had all kinds of other options where he might be able to move his hardware store. When he looked at, he needed a certain amount of space, and space can be hard to find in a city like ours, somewhat built out. And you look at the I think it was 2 houses and an office and the Midas service center. And you look at that and you're like, well, that I can't build there. What developer is going to take on by themselves, dealing with everyone, doing the transactions, buying property at market rates, and then assembling everything? But the city can do it because the city doesn't really have a choice. Like I said, we're stuck with what we've got no matter what. So if we want to see it changed, we're going to have to do it. And so, it was everyone was compensated for their property. We got in there and there were certainly hazardous materials we had to deal with. Yet another thing that would chase a developer away. Sure. And we those were all TIFable expenses on dealing with the hazardous materials, doing the remediation and prepping the site. And then Gordon takes over and he builds the building, and now there's the Ace Hardware.
Yeah. Boy, just a gorgeous looking building, fits in downtown nicely, provides a service for all the folks within a short drive of the place. Every time I go in there, they're very busy, ton of inventory. So I enjoy going there myself. So, that's a nice example of a fair amount of the commercial properties. You kind of mixed in some of the residential as we were having that conversation, because some of those buildings are multi-purpose. Let's dive into, we got about 6 minutes left, unless I can hold you a little bit longer on your lunch break.
That's no problem.
Let's talk a little bit about the housing of what's happened. And you kind of mentioned the 30 on Champlain housing, the 33 on Maiden Lane. You got the 87 going on the Fonda. What were the other ones that you guys participated on this Lake Street? There's one or two on Lake Street anyway that I can think of. Um, how many residential units have you guys or projects have you guys worked on?
A fair amount. I think maybe we might have helped here and there. Some projects have happened on their own, which is perfect. That's what we want. We have the 63 units that we and tax increment financing were a big part of at Congress in Maine. And then there's Fonda. The current plan is that when all is said and done, there will be 120 new units there, including the senior housing units that are there right now. And, the city purchased 54 through 58 North Main. So that's the old Nourish bit. Well, that's the Ralston building and As the Crow Flies.
Okay, sure.
And we fixed up the apartments above those, and we're hoping we don't need to own those buildings anymore. We're happy to pass them on to someone else who wants to take over ownership of the building, perhaps associated with the new restaurant that's going to go in the Ralston building. But that's 8 new apartments for the most part. And then we have plans. Actually, the voters have approved a TIF bond to then seek redevelopment of the Bellevue building right next to City Hall and sort of the block behind City Hall here to see if we might be able to build more apartments in the land back here. And I think that's probably going to be one of the things we need to do for downtown. Especially with COVID and remote working, the commercial market is there's not a lot of demand. There aren't a lot of or going out and trying to find jobs for your community. That game has really changed. In some ways, it doesn't exist, although we're happy to do it. And we do try to bring more jobs to the city, but bringing housing in close proximity to downtown is what's going to keep the feet on the sidewalks. It's going to be less about the jobs and more about having residents close by who will come to the restaurants and come to the cafes and come to the shops and visit Taylor Park.
Absolutely. So any other residential projects out on the horizon that you can talk about, or are they just too early to discuss?
I'd say after Fonda's done, it's the Bellevue that we're going to be talking about. Although the city, I neglected to mention, the city did buy the Messenger building out on North Main Street. And we are working on plans to redevelop that building, and several apartments will be in the mix at that location as well.
And will it be only residential, or do you see that one being a multi-use?
Multi-use. It'll be a mixed-use development.
It will be, yeah.
Based on everything we're looking at right now. Yeah.
Yep. Very cool. Very cool. So, housing is I'll bring it back to that I guess Barry called it a consortium of, I don't know, at one point there might have been upwards of 15 of us on that group studying housing. And I certainly learned a lot on that. And the first thing we did was a study, which as a new guy and a guy from the private sector, that was the last thing I wanted to do. But a year later, I was so glad that it was done, because it really laid the foundation and opened my eyes at just how big that gap was for housing. And I think if I recall correctly, they were saying that all of Franklin County and the islands were 3,350 homes or doors, if you had, some single family, some rentals, behind our current population needs. And I attribute that to a good portion of why housing shot up in the last 5 or 6 years, the prices to get into the market. So housing, how critical is that for you guys at the city with housing that someone that's renting a duplex down on Walnut Street can look forward to trying to get their own home ownership for a first-time home buyer?
Yeah, the state changed some rules recently, sort of unleashing neighborhood density in a way, and making it so it is easier throughout the state to turn single family homes into duplexes or even quadplexes, or maybe just build them outright. And that's all good. The housing crisis affects us in many different ways, right? We do need to build more housing, and we do need housing to be more affordable. It's our goal in the city, though, that we don't lose our single family homes and our neighborhoods and our backyards either. We need more housing. We need more of all types of housing. I'd like a situation where you can come to the city when you're young, you're renting an apartment, and then maybe you're owning a condo, and then maybe you own a small home, and then maybe you own a large home, and then maybe you own your own duplex that you're renting part of it out. But I want that to be able to happen without you ever having to say that in order to increase my residential evolution, that I have to leave the city. We want the city to be able to provide everything. And now, of course, we have new senior housing as well. But I would say there's another part of it is that as you could see with the city's reappraisal recently, and every community in Vermont that's getting reappraised, is that the tax levy, the portion of the tax levy that is being paid by residences, is going up proportionally to everything else, because the housing market is hotter than all the other aspects of the market. And one of the best ways to reduce that effect is to build more housing and spread out that portion of the tax levy among more and more people.
Absolutely. I don't recall which administration it was when they came up with drill baby drill for oil, but I'm of the mindset right now for housing, they should come up with a build baby build mantra for the next 10 or 20 years, because it was 10 or 20 years to find ourselves in such a shortage, and it's not going to be able to be fixed in a couple of summers in Vermont. So, Chip, we're at the 30-minute mark. Let's ask you one more question. I titled the podcast, the past, the present, and the future. You did talk about the Bellevue block and the 87 units at the Fonda site. What do you envision? And you don't have to be very specific. Maybe it's kind of some general broad brush items, but what do you see St. Albans looking like in, well, let's say, I don't know, have you hit 50 yet, sir? And when you retire in 15 or 20 years, what do you see St. Albans City looking like at that point? If you had a magic wand and everything went your way and you got lucky bounces on everything?
Well, we want to make sure that we're continuing to show investment in the public space and the private space. We want to make sure that our streetscapes and our neighborhoods and our buildings are still looking like they're in pretty good shape and they're all being used. I think if you look around and you see a vacant lot that's not being used for anything in particular, it's not a park, or it's not maybe in the next 15 years you're going to see something there. It's a building, it could be something else. I don't see a lot of large, I think maybe a few more large developments like you've seen at Congress in Maine and Fonda or at 175 Lake Street. But I think we're going to be seeing more infill development in our neighborhoods. And we actually have a list of things that are like regular municipal stuff too. Like we have a bunch of stormwater treatment we have to build. And we're always having to invest in the wastewater treatment plant. So I think you might be seeing a few more gravel wetlands in the community, something that we haven't really had around here before. I think, but otherwise, it's going to be, our future is going to be the same as what we've been doing for the past 15 years. We come up with a vision that we think would benefit the city. We present it to the city council and the voters. And the voters approve it, and then we go and we get it done.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it does take vision, and not everybody has that vision. So the fact that you guys put it together, presented it, got the voters on board, like you said, a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 margin, and got it done. Not a lot of people can say they do that, Chip. So I appreciate you. I got 5 minutes extra out of you. I want to respect your time. I do appreciate you coming on and sharing with us some of these intimate details and perspectives. I think one of my takeaways is the perspective of what you've done and how you've gone about it. I know every time I've had a conversation with you, I left smarter than when I showed up. So I appreciate that much of our relationship. So anything you want to close with, Chip?
No, I enjoyed the time very much, Jay. Thank you.
And hopefully we can bring you back on another time with some other updates or perhaps some other details. So I'm going to call that the show for today on Tuesday at 2 with the business chat with People's Trust Company, and then several. We're on St. Albans Facebook page. Chip, again, I want to thank you very much. Thanks everybody for watching. More people watch on the recorded than live at 2 o'clock. I get people working, but it seemed like a good time to do stuff. Hope I haven't taken up your, you had enough time to go to lunch before or after this, Chip, but
yeah,
we will talk again soon. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks,